And welcome back to Music Free Static. I hope you're having a fabulous day. And yesterday, as I record this, on March 20th, the news broke that famed action star Chuck Norris had died. Okay. Dude was like 80, okay, so it's not like this was a surprise. But it got me thinking of all the action movies and stuff I've grown up watching through the 80s and 90s and maybe even into the 2000s. I mean, I still like a good action movie. Let's not kid ourselves here. But there were a bunch of those movies that came out that were great. And some were beyond cheesy. But they were fun. Okay? And yes, some were some were a little bit most of them were really over the top. Okay. Now there's some, like Indiana Jones, which was more of an adventure, but it was fun, and you had Harrison Ford as the ultimate tough guy, right? And actually what was interesting about Indiana Jones is, well, Indy could handle just about anything, really. He wasn't the toughest guy on the street, right? You run into that in like Raiders of the Lost Ark, when they break out of the tomb. The Nazis have the Ark of the Covenant, but just saying that makes it sound really cheesy. Anyway, excellent movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark. But they're loading it on a plane, or they're going to load it on a plane, and Indy's like, oh yeah, we'll just hijack the plane and we'll be great. But he ends up in a fight with this mechanic that's like half a kid is taller than him, big, buff, muscular, beefy dude, you know? Yeah, Indy wasn't the toughest guy on the street, but he didn't have to be. He was smart, and, you know, sometimes he just had some really, really good luck, right? Or just, you know, you can do amazing things with a whip if you know how to handle it, right? So there was that. But then you got the whole string of Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, right? Right. If there was a patron saint of tough guys, it would be Arnold Schwarzenegger. And there were some great movies that he was in, and a lot of not so great movies, to be fair. Okay. But he was in a lot of surprisingly good ones that had some really interesting takes, right? Okay, Terminator was a horror movie, straight up. And Arnold was the villain, right? He was the Terminator. And that was an interesting movie for a couple of reasons. One, it was one of Arnold's first, okay? Now his first, Hercules in New York, right? Where here comes Arnold fresh off, Mr. Universe bodybuilding, and they redubbed his voice, right? Because turns out Hollywood execs didn't think they could get away with having a big muscle-bound dude with an Austrian accent. Okay. Now, for Hercules, okay, maybe. But for the Terminator, it was perfect because his accent plus a robotic delivery really, an intentionally robotic delivery, not like he doesn't know how to act delivery, right? But an intentionally robotic delivery, really led to the otherworldliness of the Terminator. Okay. And it was a really good movie. Okay. I don't watch it often because I don't like horror. Okay. Just in general, horror is not my thing. But Terminator was fabulous. Okay. But it also led to Terminator 2, which is probably maybe the best of the Terminator movies. You could argue back and forth between one or two. The rest of the movies, I haven't seen them. By all accounts, they're not fabulous. But Terminator 2 was one of the better action movies at the time. You know, when you have a reprogrammed Terminator, Arnold is now there to protect this kid, John Connor, right? Who was the reason they went, the whole time travel thing, you can get into it. But having Arnold be the robotic tough guy with this kid trying to teach him morality, right? You can't just go around killing people. Why? Because it's not right. Why? It's like, just no killing, okay? But, and as he tries to, the kid trying to teach the Terminator, to be a sassy dude, right? It's like, if you really want to cheese someone off, it's hasta la vista, baby. And then at the end, of course, Arnold, who made his career out of one-liners, hasta la vista, baby. And it was fun. Terminator 2 was a fabulous movie, okay? If you're looking for a good action movie, it still has a little bit of the Terminator horror aspect, but not to the same way, okay? The first Terminator was very much you have an unstoppable monster. How do you stop it? And how do you survive? How do you get away? Right? It really was a suspenseful monster movie, right? In a lot of ways. Terminator 2, yes, you still have sort of the unstoppable monster, but you have an unstoppable monster on your side too. And it was very much geared up more as an action flick more than a horror flick, right? They toned down the horror and turned up the action and the fun and all of that stuff, okay? So, big fan, right? Other thing I should point out, a lot of these movies, especially in the 80s, if you didn't have a naked woman somewhere in the movie, you were obviously failing at something, okay? I could do with less of that in the movies, but this is where we were at. The height of 80s machismo was just insane, right? One of my favorite movies of that era is Commando, okay? Now, Commando, again, another Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, where Arnold's playing a retired commando. The guy's been special forces, the toughest of the tough guys, right? And he had his team, and they're retired. They've gone through sort of a witness protection thing, and his team's retired, and somebody has been killing the team. And they come for him. Well, he is the toughest of the tough guys, but they kidnap his daughter. And they do that because they want him to kill off this president of some South American country because of whatever, okay? The bad guy wants to be president, and they want Arnold to kill the current president, okay? That side of it is pretty simple. But, they kidnap his daughter, and so he's got a time limit. It's like, okay, we're going to put you on this plane, and when the plane gets off, and then we're going to escort you out so you can go do the job. So he, of course, manages to figure out a way off the plane, and now he's got until the flight lands to find his daughter and, kill the bad guys. Okay. All sorts of fun. What made this one particularly good for me is, one, the characters he runs into are great. So, like so many of these, he's a solo operator. He right? It's the one-man army against everybody. But he's picking off the mini bosses so he can find out where the base is. And those characters are kind of fun. But even more than that, he ends up hijacking the car of a flight attendant. And it's like, I need you to help me find this guy who, so I can find my daughter, right? She doesn't buy into any of this until all sorts of stuff happens. And so, okay, eventually she's on board. But dude, she is the voice of the audience, right? It is. These fights starts like, what is up with these guys? Arnold, and I forgot the guy who plays this. He plays this. He's this black bald guy, big tough guy. He's in Predator, which was another amazing action movie with Arnold, right? Arnold had those people he liked to work with, and he worked with them a lot. And yeah, they're dropping one-liners back and forth, and oh look, I'm tougher than you because hey, here's the The bald guys, yeah, you're dealing with a MFing Green Beret. You know, I was like, I eat Green Berets for breakfast. And she's over here like, what is with all this macho nonsense, right? She doesn't say nonsense, right? But of course, being one of these 80s movies, they get knocked through a door at this motel, and sure enough, there's somebody half naked in the next room, okay? Apparently they had to. I think it was written into somebody's contract, okay? Dumb. Also, you know, the profanity flies faster than the fists, okay? It's, again, if all of that bothers you, don't watch these movies, all right? It was a different time back in the 80s, right? Not that they've stopped the profanity in modern movies, but, you know, these movies, these are a different breed, okay? You go through the 80s and into the 90s somewhat, and it's just, there's a whole different level of action movie here, right? And so while the cheese flows through Commando, it's actually really fun. And then saying Arnold made his career with one-liners in a lot of ways. And they really, really work in Commando. Okay. Predator, he doesn't have, yes, he has some one-liners, but he's a little bit more straightforward on that one. Commando, all the fun happens with the rest of the team. Okay. You got Jesse Ventura, and, you know, I ain't got time to bleed, right? All this other fun stuff, right? And Predator is another one of those that's technically horror, okay? And it's definitely gruesome at times, okay? Again, if you're going to watch these, go into them with your eyes open or be ready to hide them behind your hands, okay? Take your pick. But and Predator, has it's got the one guy who tells really, really bad and really, really dirty jokes. You know, you've got the one, you know, Native American who's he plays the stereotypical serious Native, okay? He's their tracker and all sorts of course he is, right? But as the team they do this job in South America to rescue a bunch of CIA guys. Not that they know that's what they are, but that ends up being what they are. Because they're lied to by the CIA guy who goes in with them, right? Played by, he played Greef Karga in Mandalorian. He played Apollo Creed in Rocky. But this is the source. You see the meme of the dude with the manliest handshake ever, right? The two guys, they slap hands and end up doing this sort of air arm wrestle. Yeah, you know, it's right. Again, 80s machismo, man. It's all over the place here. It's dripping off of the, you know, like oily sweat. You know, but yeah, it's but Predator was fun too. I mean, but again, what makes a lot of these movies fun is the characters. You know, Commando gets really cheesy, right? Most of the time, it's him one-on-one with the next mini boss, right? But eventually, he has to go get his daughter, and he gets to the island where his daughter is. And after raiding the best, most well-stocked army surplus store of all time, he rolls up onto this island with, you know, his tack vest, you know, with, you know, 18 different guns and a rocket launcher and grenades and all of this stuff. And he just, one man takes out an entire army and then has a one-on-one fight with the with the tough guy who's sort of leading the army. Okay. And again, it is a stupid yeah, the banter is just horrifically bad and also really fun, okay? And it's no secret to say Arnold wins in this movie, right? He throws a pipe through the bad guy into a steam plant, so now steam is shooting through the pipe, through the bad guy and out, and his line is just, let off some steam, Bennett. It's like, Really? This is what we went with? Of course this is what we went with. Right? It's just, yeah, this is just how we roll. And, it was fun. Right? Die Hard has the same type of thing, right? It's, sure, the action is fun. And Bruce Willis, he's a cop. And yeah, he's a tough guy, but he's not the toughest of the tough guys. But he's willing just to keep doing what he has to do to rescue his wife, right? And because he's a tough guy, this is what tough guys do, right? This is what cops do. We're gonna run to the gunfire, right? And yeah, you get the bad jokes and the one-liners and the best possible portrayal of a villain by Alan Rickman ever, right? I remember watching this. I was 12, I think, for some reason, when my dad took me to see this movie. And man, Alan Rickman was so good as Hans Gruber, man. It's like, okay, yep, I like this guy. I like this guy a lot. So when he showed up again as the Sheriff of Nottingham in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, man, it's like, yep, all right, this is cool. And the bad guy in Quigley Down Under. Man, speaking of a great action movie, okay, it's a little bit later, so it doesn't quite have the machismo in some ways, but it's also a throwback to the westerns because it is in fact a western. It just happens to take place in Australia, and so you've got Tom Selleck as the hero. He answers an advertisement to go down to Australia. They're looking for snipers, sharpshooters, and he gets down there and realizes, yeah, we need people who are good with rifles because the local Aborigines have they've figured out the range of our guns and they stay out of range. It's like, oh, I see what's going on here, and no, I'm not going to be part of it. Okay, and then that proceeds with your hero versus an army type of story, which is great. Okay, Tom Selleck does an amazing job with that, and it's just, honestly, that one is, I like a good Western, and Quigley is one of the better Westerns I've seen. Okay, I'm not even going to get into all the John Wayne stuff, right? Which it's a totally different category of stuff, right? But you look at all these movies in the 80s, and dude. Some of it was just great because, look, we could blow stuff up, right? How many cars can we destroy here? It's like with Speed, okay? Speed was early 90s, okay? And it was Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock. And they both do great. But I realized, now, I knew Keanu, of course, from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, which turns out, not an 80s action movie. But he shows up in Speed, and you realize that, yeah, Keanu, he was not the best actor in the world in those days, okay? I think he's probably gotten better over the years, but there were definitely times it's like, really? That's the take you went with? Okay, we'll go with it. But it's fun. He and Bullock play off each other so well, and he does a great job. And again, like most of these movies, what makes them fun is, yes, you have big explosions and stuff, okay? But what's fun is the characters. And the characters interacting. It's Keanu's Jack Traven, I think. And his banter not only with Dennis Hopper, who just chews the scenery as the bad guy, man. He is so good. With their back and forth. The way he deals with the people who are stuck on the bus that they can't let get below 50, and his calls back to his man in the chair, right, who's played by Jeff Daniels, I think, and all of that back and forth, man. That's part of what makes these movies fun. Is, yes, things blowing up is cool, but what's fun is the characters and the banter and all this stuff, right? That lean into the comedic action as opposed to just, we're going to make things blow up, right? And I think this is the problem that Michael Bay had with so many of his movies, right? You look at Transformers or TMNT or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, right? I guess they actually was that the sort of live action turtles where the turtles just look really stupid, look like roided out Shrek. They missed the fun, and from a Ninja Turtles movie, that's just insane. Okay, because Ninja Turtles, if nothing, Ninja Turtles was fun, right? But it was. I think that was just completely missing from the Turtles movie. And Transformers, yeah, things were blowing up, but you didn't care? At least I didn't. Because you couldn't tell what was going on, for one thing, because all of the robots looked basically the same. Because there was nothing to tell them apart. I mean, yes, okay, if you still frame, sometimes you can kind of see, yes, this is Optimus Prime and this is somebody else. But there's so much smoke and fire and all this stuff, and the robots are all basically gray. It makes it really hard to see who's doing what to whom. Okay. So, yeah, it's the problem with a lot of those Michael Bay movies that came out in the 2000s. Back here during Speed and Commando, yes, you get explosions, but the story is still the important part here. We're not making this movie just to blow things up. We're making this movie to tell this story. Okay. And, there are some of those movies that were not necessarily one against an army. Things like Top Gun. Okay. Which Top Gun almost got me into the Navy. Okay. Congratulations. Your propaganda just about worked. I wanted to be a fighter pilot for the Navy. I didn't do that, obviously. And it turns out I was too tall to fly Tomcats anyway, because they had a height limit, and I think I ended up being just a little bit over that. Okay. I remember once reading that the only actor in that movie small enough to actually fly a Tomcat was Tom Cruise. Like, none of the others would have actually fit in a cockpit of an F-14. But yeah, again, what made Top Gun good? Sure, the aerial combat was amazing, right? Watching those fighters twist and turn and do all of the aerobatics was amazing. Okay. I loved it. Okay. I'd wanted to be a pilot anyway. Top Gun pushed me in that direction. Star Wars was another one. I loved watching the fighters, which is why I'm really excited for Star Wars Starfighter coming out here. And it's 2027? I don't remember when it's coming out, but I'm very excited about it because Starfighters, yes, this has been missing from Star Wars for a long time. But anyway, but Top Gun, again, 80s action movie. But what makes it great, aside from, yes, the action is amazing. You can see all the fun stuff going on. But it's the characters. And you want to spend time with these characters. And they're so fun. They're so fun. Right? Yeah. And yeah, Maverick in Top Gun is not a dude you really want to be around in some ways. Okay. Sure. The dude's he's got Riz, right? He rolled high on his charisma score. He is doing great. But, like most of the other pilots, he is an egotistical jerk a lot of the time, okay? And he lets his ego run away with him a few times. Yeah, it's still a fun movie to watch, okay? Let's see, what other fun was that? Okay, of course, going back to Arnold, of course, you got Conan. Again, early in Arnold's career, where his Austrian accent could have hindered him, and they instead said, you know what? Conan's a barbarian. We can lean into his accent because he's a barbarian. Okay. And, it worked. Arnold, he did so good. Of course, again, he's coming off his Mr. Universe, bodybuilding championships, right? Where they're going to show off, this jacked muscle man because we have a jacked muscle man, right? If you need, eye candy for women or guys who just swing that way, you couldn't go much harder than Conan. Okay. Again, 80s action movie with more than its share of nudity in it. So again, if you're avoiding that, highly recommend you do so. But Conan was one. He didn't speak a lot, okay, but everything that's going on in the world was done so well, right? Subutai as his companion throughout a lot of the movie is great, and why can't I remember the name of the girl? It's a problem. They didn't say it often. I mean, she had a name, and it was a name too. But as she's a woman who could stand with him, right? Who's just as tough as he is, and say, yep, this is, and obviously they hook up in soft lighting, but she's a great character, even crazier than Arnold is in some ways throughout the movies, right? It's great. So much fun. And yeah, James Earl Jones as the villain. Man, I mean, and a really smooth talking villain in a lot of ways, right? He was great as the voice of Darth Vader because his voice was just menacing. Okay. Here as the villain, he plays basically, it's a priest. And so he's got that sort of smooth, yes, it's okay. What I'm doing is good. We're trying to help, and I know what real power is. It's not steel, it's flesh, it's people, and he's got that sort of smooth talking character that just is magnified by the fact that James Earl Jones had this amazing voice, right? So, yeah, it was good. It was, unfortunately, Conan the Destroyer, not so good, right? You got Conan, right? Arnold's still there, and then you've got was it Kareem Abdul-Jabbar maybe, and Andre the Giant. And it's fun. There's a great picture of Arnold standing next to these two guys and just being dwarfed by both of them, right? He just looks tiny. And for a dude who's supposed to be like 6'1", 6'2", if I recall right, and of course, jacked, standing next to these guys who make him look small, it's impressive. Sadly, the movie itself wasn't impressive. That's not one I go back and watch. There was just a special combination of the hero tough guy who could beat an army, right? Which is typical of your superhero movies, right? Whether you're dealing with Iron Man or Superman or Green Lantern or, take your pick, right? The one person army, Miss Marvel, right? All of this stuff who could just take on everybody. And, here they are. In theory, they're not superheroes. They're just the one-man tough guy who can shrug off everything. And, it turns out they can walk through a battlefield where everybody's shooting at them and not get shot. The plot armor runs thick. The nice thing about plot armor is it doesn't encumber you, so you could do all those cool action rolls, right? It really is. What makes those movies so fun is the fact that they don't shy away from how ludicrous they are, okay? They're not like winking at the camera, but they're there to have fun, right? The Rock is another excellent example. I'm not talking about Dwayne Johnson. I'm talking about the movie starring Nicolas Cage and Sean Connery, where, dude, Harris, I think is his last name. I'm forgetting his first name. He plays this Marine who, with a bunch of his guys, takes hostages on Alcatraz, and he's arguing trying to get better treatment for Marines. He says, our government has abandoned our soldiers in all of these ways. I'm trying to make a point that we need, and he's making a point in a really, horrific way, right? Because not only is he holding all of these tourists hostage on Alcatraz Island, he's got these rockets full of VX gas or something that if he launches it into San Francisco, it's going to kill a lot of people. Okay. So you got that going on, and you've got Nick Cage, who plays basically he's a bomb tech, right? His job is to disable weapons, and he's dealt with chemical weapons and a bunch of other stuff, right? Again, sort of the best of the best, but he's not a fighter. Okay. And they recruit Sean Connery. They pull him out of prison. They don't say exactly what he's been in prison for. Okay. But we do know that he's a spy. Worked for MI6 and was sort of the they don't say it. Obviously it's not his name, but he's basically James Bond if Bond had gotten caught by by a government and locked away because he knew too much, which might always be the case for James Bond. Who knows? But he escaped from Alcatraz, so they grab him, hoping that he can get them back into Alcatraz so they can do the thing. And it is, again, it's fun. Nick Cage and Sean Connery play off each other so well. The banter between them is great. And again, you're dealing with an F-bomb laden movie, but these are, again, the 80s and 90s were, especially the early 90s, were a different breed of movie, I'll tell you, right? But they were more than happy to lean into the levity and the snark and all of that to make you want to actually root for the characters and to be with those characters and spend time with them and care when those characters were actually going through, all the bad stuff, right? They're dealing with the, getting shot, and can he actually do the thing and all of this stuff, right? It was fun. There are a bunch of those. Now, to bring this back around to how I started this, I was going through all those movies. I had to go look. I realized I don't think I've seen more than maybe one Chuck Norris movie. Right? Because, right, I'm going through this list of good action movies. Chuck Norris isn't in any of them. Okay? Turns out he made a lot of bad action movies. But he was a part of that quintessential tough guy set, right? The one movie I saw was Sidekicks, which was more of a kid's movie than anything else, where it's this kid who he and his karate teacher, played by Chuck Norris, end up stopping the bad guys. Okay, I think I'd seen it once, right? It was your fairly typical kids movie, right? Kids action movie. The one thing I did see with Chuck Norris a little more often was Walker, Texas Ranger, which was a good show, right? Your fairly typical cop movie at the time, or a cop show, and it was good. Chuck Norris was great in it. I didn't watch it a lot. I don't know why. I think I was watching it in reruns, now that I think about it. And it was just on at a weird time, but I liked watching it when I could, but it wasn't something that I absolutely had to carve out of my schedule to watch because, again, 90s and linear television, this is a thing. But I understand why people were loving this show, right? Because it was a good show with a good message, and Chuck Norris, he did the Chuck Norris thing, and he, there was no problem a roundhouse could not solve, right? He could roundhouse kick his way out of any problem, and it was a thing, right? But what I remember most about Chuck Norris was less so much his movies or his shows. It was all the memes that were dropping for him back in the late 90s and early 2000s, right? You've been on the internet too long when you remember all of the Chuck Norris facts, right? You remember these things? It was the Chuck Norris is so tough, he makes onions cry, right? Chuck Norris doesn't do push-ups, he pushes the earth down, right? There was a whole litany of these things, right? there's some I've heard in multiple contexts. I mean, I've heard one. I heard it about Chuck Norris, right? I heard it on Star Trek. You know, it's like once Chuck Norris was bit by a rattlesnake, and after several days of intense pain, the snake died. Right? That's been going for a while, right? But yeah, it was a special breed of movies back then, and unfortunately, Chuck Norris ended up in a bunch of really bad movies. Apparently, I mean, I don't know. I've heard Delta Force is good. I never saw it. You know, again, he was just one of those. I've seen a few of Stallone's movies. Tango and Cash was really fun with Sylvester Stallone and Kurt Russell. Okay, that was a good one. Not as good as some of the others, but it was fun. And honestly, Stallone, most of his movies were not the type that I was getting into. I saw Rambo. Rambo is a much more serious movie than people give it credit for. Rambo 2, 3, that just becomes one man against an army, right? And Hot Shots. Hot Shots Part 2 did a fabulous job of ripping apart those movies. I think I've talked about Hot Shots before. So yeah, good stuff. But yeah, you go back and there was just a different breed of those sort of action movies back there. And then you get into people like Jean-Claude Van Damme, who apparently learned martial arts from Chuck Norris. I didn't even talk about the Van Damme movies. You know, movies like Bloodsport and all of those, right? I watched a bunch of those. I can't remember all of them. Because a lot of them, they all ended up the same, you know, Bloodsport, Time Cop, you know, all that fun stuff. But yeah, they were a special breed, man. So let me know if did you watch those types of movies when you were growing up? Do you watch them now? I don't know. Let me know. Do you have a favorite? Drop it in the comments. And let's reminisce about the 80s action movies as we also maybe remember how much of a legacy of Chuck Norris in some of that stuff. And until next time, be excellent to each other. And this is Music Free Static signing off.